Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live chat and survey. We have a guest expert from the industry. Odds are you know him and follow him, David M. Davis at Train Signal, but all over the internet as well and various other places, and a resident vSphere expert. I didn't list all your certifications there, David, but you've got pretty much all of them, right?
That's very kind of you. Yeah, I've got quite a few. I hate to say all of them because there's still some that I'd like to achieve, but yeah. Been around the industry for quite a while, and I really enjoy achieving different certifications and learning. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, and the purpose of this discussion, thank you for being our guest expert today on today's poll. If you want to get your own certifications, Train Signal is a great place to go. And in addition to a chance, by participating in today's live chat and survey, you will have a chance to win a Train Signal DVD course of your choice, probably something that David wrote, as well as an opportunity to win a Drobo B800i 8-bay iSCSI SAN storage device for your home lab or heck, just for your house to store tons of your, as we like to say, legally downloaded content. But really, this is an opportunity, David, for folks to get some advice from experts in the industry. And we'll go ahead and get started with our first poll of the day. I'll launch that. And the poll asks, how many users are in your environment? This will give us an idea, folks, as you enter in your answers, what type of population we have today. Because, David, you have folks taking your training courses of all sizes, right? From the biggest enterprises to the smallest SMBs?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a lot of Train Signal customers, are well-known companies, the government and, big companies we've heard of. But, at least I would guess half of the Train Signal customers are just individuals, people who are just wanting to improve their skill set, or, maybe they're even in college at this point and they're wanting to learn VMware vSphere or Windows Server. So, yeah, kind of all over the board.
All right, as we share out those results, you'll see that neck and neck, right about fewer than 100 and 100 to 250 are where the population is today. And, David, this is something good for me because at Drobo, we make storage that's super easy to use. This session today will be mostly about virtualization and the role storage plays there. But most popular our products are among those particular sizes of companies, typically because the IT person probably is by themselves or they're a member of a very small team and they got to do pretty much everything on their own. So being a one-man band, so to speak, could be challenging. So having good access to information to help make your projects easier as well as easy-to-use products as you roll out virtualization solutions is a big help. So we'll have a couple more demographics questions here, folks, as we get through this, and we'll get to the discussion. Since this is about server virtualization, let's ask the question, how many of your servers are virtualized today? And while we let those poll responses rack up, David, as a whole, you staying in tune with the virtualization industry, where are we on our, quote, path to the cloud, so to speak? Or how virtualized are people in general? There's a lot of statistics out there. What statistic do you believe in most as far as how many servers are virtualized? It's not zero for sure, and it's not 100%. It's somewhere in the middle. Where would you put that number?
To be politically correct, I could say 50%, right in the middle. That's some of the numbers I've seen. More than half of the servers have been virtualized, which is surprising to me because a lot of the people I talk to are already using VMware virtualization. So you kind of get this idea that everybody's using it already, but there's so many companies out there that still have yet to even get started, in their path to virtualization. So.
And as the studies show here, great. We have about 10% of folks that are still in the early stages, another 20-some-odd% in early stages as well. It looks like you're a good prognosticator, David, because as the poll shows, 57% have most of their stuff there. And I think that's a factor of that a lot of folks have virtualization in place, but maybe there's a couple of straggler applications. They just can't get off physical machines for some reason. There's a lot of things happening in the market to help people along that path. But I've always been a believer that it's never one versus the other. You're generally going to find there's a balance and coexistence of a lot of technologies. So your old physical server, there may be a reason to still have it. In this case, you'll see, though, that you've got the majority of people that are virtualizing so far. So that's great. Let's talk about how storage plays into it. But before, one last demographics question. I'm confident that the number one answer is going to be the one that starts with a V or the one last in the alphabet. But we like to ask these questions just to see what folks are using. David, do you find folks using a little bit of both? Have you ever seen customers using both Hyper-V and VMware at the same time?
I think you'll see more and more customers using both. VMware is obviously very popular. I'm sure will continue to be very popular. Microsoft also has, an interesting new offering with Windows Server 2012 Hyper-V, and I've been, creating some training videos on it lately. And I've also been learning about a solution for multi-hypervisor management, that they say can actually help you reduce your overall cost by sort of using, just like we use storage tiering, right? You've got SSD and you've got SATA. You could use virtualization tiering. So I think it's an interesting concept for the future.
Well, tiering is one of those cool features that I think is especially important to a smaller organization, because if it can be done automatically, shoot, a lot of virtual servers, and we'll get into the discussion here, they are driving really a scarcity of resources in the storage, if anything. CPU and memory tend to be pretty abundant, the reason why you can run so many virtual machines on a server. But when you consolidate that I/O, especially transactionally oriented I/Os from databases, email and such, it can cause some strain on a storage device. That's why everyone's looking to SSD. You can get great efficiency by having both SSD and hard drive with a tiering solution that, especially if it can be done automatically, helps save you time too, because tweaking that can be resource intensive. Speaking about resources, looks like 2-to-1 folks are using VMware over Hyper-V, but because this is not a zero-sum game, it must be that folks have some coexistence here. So right around what you were saying there, David, folks are probably using a little bit of both. Now, with Server 2012, do you think that's going to fuel a lot more people looking at Hyper-V because of some of the new features that are there? Or really is it just folks were waiting for Microsoft to come out with a new version? Because they've had virtualization for some time.
Yeah, a lot of the new features in 2012, I think will really, it'll do both. To answer your question, I think people who have been waiting, for a Microsoft virtualization solution that was more powerful and feature-rich, now is the time for them. And then also the people who are already using VMware vSphere, some percentage of them will say, hey, I really want to check out what, 2012 offers. It's got some interesting features, and, they might consider using multiple hypervisors. So a little bit of both.
All right. Well, what I want to do here is ask a question specifically about your virtual environment. Looks like most folks are doing some sort of virtualization. So my question is, for your virtual environment, what is the most important performance metric that you are looking to solve? So I mentioned before that a lot of folks are having some challenges with storage, but really, anytime you're sharing resources, you're setting up an option to potentially create some oversubscription or a conflict there. In your training, what are some of the rules of thumb that you have around architecture in avoiding bottlenecks, or at least designing an architecture that's well balanced? Do you have like a couple of quick tips you can give folks out there, David?
My quick tip has always been to find a good tool that'll help you do it. We've got, what's the number of IOPS per drive, Mario? I always forget that number. 100 and...
It depends. No, it depends. If you have a 7,200 RPM drive, you can get about 75 IOPS. If you have a 15,000 RPM drive, you can get about 150 IOPS.
Okay. There's little tips like that, but, to me, one of the benefits of virtualization is once you get, the more things you get consolidated on there, the more you can use tools that'll analyze things, storage and CPU and memory and all these different resources to help you make intelligent decisions. Because when things are on physical servers, measuring this kind of stuff and sizing and everything, it can be, much more challenging.
Right. And as we share out the results from this last poll question, you'll see that folks do believe that I/O performance and number of IOPS is probably the scarcity factor that they're looking at the most. Latency, I think, has a lot to do with it. People are looking for low latency technologies. Now, in your experience, David, working with customers from a storage perspective, do you see folks preferring NAS, preferring iSCSI, preferring fiber channel, and are any one of those technologies you think the most widely used?
I mean, I started off using fiber channel, but grew less and less, you know, passionate about it over time. With the expense and the complexity, and over time, I've really enjoyed, I guess, iSCSI the most. NFS always just seems so simple. So to me, I mean, most of the customers I've talked to, when I speak at VMUX and events like that, have been really using iSCSI, if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. NFS is perceived as being easier, but it is a server behind a server, so to speak. And architecturally, having an iSCSI array can be really efficient. Naturally, Drobo is a big fan of folks thinking about using iSCSI because what we talked about tiering before, David. There might be some applications where fiber channel is absolutely necessary because you need ultra low latency and ultra high throughput. But fiber channel in and of itself is not going to get you higher IOs per se, because as you mentioned, that's a product of the number of drives you have there or the mix of the types of drives that you have. 7200 RPM, 15K SAS, or SSD, which is the latest and greatest stuff out there. So I think the reason why SSDs are becoming so popular, I think it was this last VMworld when I last saw you, David, it seemed like it was the SSD expedition or exposition, not necessarily VMworld, because everything was all about SSDs. Were there any storage technologies that jumped out to you that you thought were interesting in that regard?
I mean, I think, just SSD in general, just all that you can do with it sort of has, unlimited, uses. I mean, you could put it in a laptop, you could put it in a server. I mean, you could start using, even local storage, in some cases in lab environments, even just throw an SSD in there, and it's amazing how many IOPS, you can get from it. I love the tiering options that the storage vendors are, putting out with SSD and SATA. And, being an IT manager who used to have to buy storage, the number of spindles, to get so many IOPS rule would just kill me. Using these massive drives when you need so little storage, but you need so many IOPS to fill a big array with these big drives that you're not even going to use that capacity just to get the IOPS. I used to hate that. But now with SSD, that's not the case anymore.
All right, folks. Hey, thanks, David, for joining today as our guest expert. Folks, thank you also for participating in today's poll as you're filling out the answers. We'll see if we can stump our expert, David Davis, to see if his answers match what the general population feels. And good news, David, you're definitely doing well so far. I'm about to publish the last one. Keep in mind, folks, those who participate in today's live program are going to get an opportunity to win a Train Signal DVD, probably written by David himself, as well as a Drobo iSCSI SAN for their house so they can build out their own home lab or just put all their cool personal content on it. As I close out that last question, it seems that folks agree, David, from the standpoint of growing your IOPS. It used to be that you'd either have to add new storage devices, kind of a pod architecture, something that's not necessarily a bad idea, but the way you'd have to do it. You either have to then do classic scale-up storage with a big old controller and lots of shelves behind it. Nobody voted for that one. Not to say that some classic things aren't good, but in this case, I think I'd agree that architecture is something that doesn't really align well with virtualization. It aligned well with the big monolithic server, but not necessarily with server virtualization. Scale-out storage approach is one way to do it, but it looks like folks like the idea of hybrid. All flash storage devices. Have you had any chance to test any of those? And do you see a specific fit there? Is it for a certain size of customer? What do you think about all flash versus hybrid?
I haven't had a chance to test any flash yet. I've put some SSD drives in my cart, like in various online websites, and never actually gone through and bought one. I've been interested in it, so if anybody wants to send me a flash drive, now's your opportunity. Oh. But I've read a lot, and obviously at VMworld going around and talking to all the different vendors, about auto tiering and SSD. It's just astounding, what you can do with those SSD drives. I've actually been wanting to put one in my new MacBook has one. I've been wanting to put one in my Windows laptop. But yeah, cool stuff. All
right. Well, Drobo has some technology that allows you to use SSDs as well. Just our view on the industry has always been that storage is expensive and complicated. It's not that you couldn't do it. Most IT folks are perfectly able to do it. But if you think about what's most scarce in our lives, it's not CPU and memory, it's probably time. You might say money because you'd want more time to make more money, but odds are, when we're all old and gray, David, we're going to be not saying, darn it, I wish I would have, done X, Y, Z more. Folks will probably say they wish they had more time to do other things. So time is really tough in today's on-demand society, and as a result, storage technologies that can save you time are great. Things like SSDs that can save you time by accelerating some workloads. So overall, the time it takes for certain operations to happen in your environment, there's a really, really big benefit there. And are you seeing right now the biggest challenge folks have from a virtualization standpoint around performance management, or are there other areas that creep up as the biggest one? I tend to hear that all the time because I mostly deal with storage. But what would you say the top three challenges are for folks with virtualization today in terms of just ongoing management and keeping users happy?
I would say performance and capacity is definitely in the top three. Maybe complexity might be another one. Just
sure.
The complexity of managing their environment. Just the overhead. I think a lot of administrators just wish things could be easier. And let's see, third one. I wonder if even the third one in many companies might be just the politics of virtualization,
right,
and cloud computing and sort of gaining acceptance from the business owners to try to get to that 100% virtualization mark.
Right. And like all things that were changed, people are resistant to change. In fact, we've been taught as IT folks that you don't want to change something that's working good. So arguably, there's some things that if they're working just fine, you probably don't want to touch them in the sense of getting everything virtualized. Do you think that that's a goal that folks should have? Really, is it all or nothing? Or is it just virtualize the stuff that benefits the most? When you're training folks on the stuff that they might want to consider virtualizing, what kind of advice do you normally give?
I think 100% virtualization should be an eventual goal, but if you're just getting started, then that's not your short-term goal. Your short-term goal might be to start with the low-hanging fruit. As we used to say, the easiest apps to virtualize, or if you're feeling more aggressive, start with a particular application, a production application. Once you've had a proof of concept. So
right.
That's my advice.
Well, when do you need to buy all the servers? Because are you in working with customers seeing that folks can repurpose a lot of their existing hardware, or do they need to go out and buy new servers to go with it? I imagine for the proof of concept, no. But as you start to roll things out in production, are you seeing people repurposing or are doing it as they buy new server equipment and rolling out those old ones when they're coming off lease or when they're coming off maintenance?
I've seen both. It depends on the age of your server. If you've got 5-year-old servers, you're not going to be able to repurpose them. But if you have a couple-year-old servers, you might be able to repurpose them. In my virtualization project, we did a lot of repurposing. But it all depends on, if it's lease equipment, like in our case, many times we had 3-year, leases on our equipment. We could, get a brand new server, and with that brand new server, load a hypervisor on it and virtualize, right there, say 20 physical servers. So, it kind of depends on your situation. But it's really amazing what you could do even with just one new server. In my case, we would get approval for, let's say, one new application, and we'd say, okay, we need a new server, and by the way, let's make it a hypervisor here, and then on that one server that was purchased for one application, we could squeeze in many more applications and kind of virtualize the sneaky way. I hate to say, but whatever works for your company.
No, it's not sneaky when it's helped save you time. You were doing that on purpose so you can make maintenance easier. You can do everything easier. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's always good. If it's good for both the finance folks and the IT folks, you've got something with some legs to it. We're going to launch another question here about storage technologies and what you think is most interesting coming out of the most recent announcements from the likes of VMware and Microsoft and such. But before we go ahead and do that, I'm going to let folks know that we're up to our second to last question here in the prepared poll, and we're going to open up the live Q&A to everybody to ask David your specific questions for some advice on ways to optimize your virtualization environment. Again, thanks, David, for joining today's live chat and survey. We will launch the very next question now, and it is, which of the storage technologies in the list do you think that are most interesting to you over the next 12 months? And the reason we ask this question, David, is that historically, most storage functions, since the mainframe days, when we went from mainframe out to distributed computing, a lot of functionality like replication, deduplication, other optimizations were done in the storage because there was a scarcity of CPU and memory when you went to distributed computing. We're almost coming full circle back to the idea that the processing engine in the middle is vastly overpowered compared to the end devices. So it only makes sense to migrate some of those end devices back, especially considering that the storage is what's getting pounded the most these days when we're concentrating so many applications at the same storage. So we have folks answering the question right now. I know that at VMworld, VMware has now included in vSphere 5.1 Standard Edition the ability to do storage vMotion, which is totally cool. That was only available in the enterprise before. You've got new vSphere replication, which was with Site Recovery Manager. It was available in 5.0, but you needed to have SRM to use it. Now you can use just the replication part, even in Essentials Plus, one of the lowest paid-for licenses of VMware, a cool sort of thing. Hyper-V Replica with Hyper-V 3 and Server 2012 has been made a whole lot better too. And there's other things like, Zen Server. Not a lot of folks are using those, but they do have site recovery integrated there. And there's a lot of backup applications. I picked just one of them, Veeam, which is happens to be real popular these days, which also has replication built in. Of all these, personally, do you think they're all cool and people will use them all, or are there certain ones that jump out to you the most as being interesting? Given that not a lot of folks are doing DR yet. They need to figure out how to do it within a virtual environment.
These are all really great features. It's hard to pick just one. Storage vMotion, I guess if there's any of them that I said, well, I can't do without, it would be storage vMotion, because I've just come to, expect that, I guess, in vSphere. But I'm especially interested to try vSphere replication. I haven't actually tried it yet. I know there's a virtual appliance you download on each side and replicate, over the WAN. I actually have tried Hyper-V Replica, and very simple, very straightforward. It's amazing, these replication solutions that are including now in the hypervisor that you used to have to buy some, massive, expensive, application-specific replication tool to take advantage of. So, I think it's great that now, even SMBs could take advantage of these replication features that were previously available only to the largest, companies that could afford it. So
yeah, no, I like them because they're affordable for a reason. You can use any storage that you want. Heck, if you wanted to put a virtual storage appliance out there, you could conceivably have all internal drives and still have a fully featured virtualization environment with failover and orchestration, which is cool. My thought on this would be that because you have the freedom with these technologies to mix and match different storage devices, you really now have a lot more accessible DR architectures, because historically it was by a Noah's Ark pair of typically mid-range to enterprise type storage devices. They would have the replication built in. You'd build a run book around how to recover using replication with your applications. And now everything being more tightly coupled at the virtualization layer, you can more easily orchestrate that, and you have flexibility on the hardware side. So like all things, the virtualization intends to make the hardware less expensive. I think you get that same benefit here on the storage side, which is why Drobo is a big fan of some of the things that these companies have done, because our vision's always been you want to minimize the cost and the stuff that doesn't get you bonuses, like the storage devices. While it's probably the least interesting technology in the entire stack, kind of important though, most folks would rather spend most of their time in the middle managing at the virtualization layer, and they are allowed to do more functions there now because of this. You mentioned storage vMotion, so you've always been an enterprise user then. You've always bought the enterprise license. Do you find that most of the folks that take your training have bought enterprise, or do they have VMware licenses kind of scattered about the spectrum?
I think it's kind of scattered about the spectrum, but everyone wants to learn, the enterprise grade features in hopes of, maybe they'll be able to use it at their company one day. Maybe they need it for certification, or maybe, they just want to keep up to date on what's out there in the chance, they get a job somewhere else and, they can say, yeah, I know storage vMotion. So, everybody wants to learn, every feature, and that's what I try to, provide in the training.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about Train Signals. I'm happy that you were able to join us today, David, for the live session. Folks who have joined live will get a chance to win a Train Signal DVD as a part of participating in today's program. And also, we will have a very lucky winner of an iSCSI SAN for their house. But wait, there's more. You'll also get a chance, if you didn't win, to participate in a full survey on the internet. It takes you about 5-10 minutes to complete. We'd love for you to go ahead and go through that as well, because that will get you in for a second chance to win an iSCSI SAN of your own for your house. The last question, as you'll see here, Hyper-V Replica was what most people were interested in. Now, you can't have a survey without cloud, right? So here is our mandatory cloud question in any survey. And I think for cloud is something that's very interesting. People use it interchangeably in a lot of cases. Cloud equals server virtualization. Cloud equals storage that exists in Amazon cloud. Cloud equals a lot of things to folks. For you, where do you see most folks that you interact with in terms of their journey to cloud storage? Are they really 100% outsourced so that nothing's on premises? Probably not, because they're doing server virtualization. The other extreme, where it's not for them, it's probably somewhere in the middle. Do you think that folks are using it as an additional backup copy? Is it really just offsite backup where they don't keep any backup on site? Or really is it, really aggressive where it's a local cache or really no local storage? Do you have kind of any views on how this market's developing? Because you've done a lot of training in virtualization. This is kind of the next step now, getting rid of your local storage. Where do you see us on that continuum?
Yeah, everybody loves, of course, software as a solution, cloud services. I mean, Gmail, they give you, 5 gigs for email, and, Dropbox, they give you some, I can't remember, crazy amount. I think I've got 102 gigs now.
You have a lot of friends, that's why.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love, cloud, options like that. But then I've used other infrastructure clouds where, you have to be very careful, because every minute that your virtual machine is powered on, you're spending pennies, and those pennies really add up. I've seen the bills. And, those clouds, they also charge you for storage. For example, I've got a cloud, service that gets 600 gigs of storage, for this entire, virtual infrastructure. And 600 gigs really isn't a lot. I mean, when you try to, put a bunch of virtual machines on there and you clone virtual machines and do all these things. So, cloud storage, I think that they're great, for replication and backup. But again, you're paying, it's a metered usage solution. So you just have to be careful with those. I think, like the survey says, backup, copy, disaster recovery as a service type thing, I think is where I would be interested in starting if I were, an IT manager today, considering something like that.
Yeah, I think that for most folks, it depends on the type of business, too. If you're a 100% internet-based business, if your applications are written in the cloud and served from the cloud, it would make sense that you'd have a no on-premises IT infrastructure. And there's some number of companies that have that. For traditional companies, there is the need for some sort of on-premises storage. And it's Drobo's view right now that you have to follow 3-2-1 best practices. If you want to protect your data, you need 3 copies of it on at least 2 different types of media, and one of those media has to be off-site to get really full protection. And with a hurricane going on right now, if you've got your storage in the basement, you might not have access to your storage right now. Not because the power's out, because it's flooded there on the East Coast. So it is important to have off-site backup, which is one of the reasons I'm very pro-cloud. Even though I work at a storage company, I'm a believer that it's great for an additional backup copy of select data, or even full solution for off-site backup if your data set's small enough where it can be practical for you. Drobo customers tend to be pack rats and have tons of data racked up, lots of terabytes, which is cool for you who are listening, because you're going to get a chance to win a box that you can put more than 30 terabytes of storage into for all those people who save stuff forever. Anyway, that's the end of our prepared program, the end of the first half hour. We wanted to get through that sort of stuff to kind of set the stage for an open Q&A. And do you have a couple minutes, David? Because we have a lot of questions from online that we want to go ahead and present to you so you can give your expert opinion.
Absolutely.
All right. We have a comment here that at work, folks are using Hyper-V, not their choice, and at their home lab, they use VMware. So there you go. Maybe people are bipartisan out of necessity, not necessarily out of choice, but that's cool. And I think what you're saying from a training perspective, being trained up and certified in both is only a good thing because it gives you more options and gives you the ability to react to new projects that come up or new opportunities.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the more, intelligent and educated you can be on all the different solutions, the better off you are. I mean, you don't want to be one of those people that says, I hate Hyper-V. And they say, why? Well, I don't know. I haven't tried it, but I just don't like it. You want to be one of those people who said, trust me, I've tried it. And, this is different, that's different, and that's different. And I think that's, to me, the great part about education is, learning how things are different. And they don't boil down just to, how fast your race car can go. There's a lot more to it than that. There's usability, there's, support, there's, the richness of the community around that product. There's so many things that are sort of intangible, to measure about, selecting something like a hypervisor.
Right. Here's another one, some more commentary. And it talks to the price of VMware. And you probably don't dabble too much in offering opinions there, but certainly features like Storage vMotion used to be only in the enterprise license, and those can cost quite a lot. VMware has done a great job of bringing more of their functionality into their lower cost licenses. But the comment talks about the fact that there is a fair amount of investment required in VMware. But if you look at Citrix, their Zen Cloud platform, especially their management stack, Zen Center, which you can get for free versus the, vSphere vCenter stack, which can cost quite a bit of money. You opened up today's discussion, David, about managing your environment. Do you think that someone needs to plan on, if they're going to plan on doing VMware, they need to plan on budgeting for the vCenter and the other management pieces because it's kind of important? You can't have one without the other? Or do they look at other hypervisors if they're budget constrained because you really want to make sure you have enough to pay for that management layer?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, you definitely need to plan on having a management layer. There's a few companies out there that probably, go with free ESXi. For certain use cases, maybe they have multiple manufacturing plants and they need 5, virtual machines at each plant or something, and they just run one server at each plant. Potentially, I could see that as a use case, but still the management of, those hosts can be, very problematic without, vCenter. And there's so many things that I think, would just expect to be able to do with your virtual infrastructure that you just can't do without vCenter. For example, you can't create a template, without vCenter. You can't clone a virtual machine without vCenter. You can't, view a consolidated inventory of all your hosts and virtual machines without vCenter. So yeah, absolutely. I would just plan on having something like that. Talking about the Citrix solution, that sounds very, interesting to me. I'm always interested to learn about new solutions. I haven't played with Citrix myself, so it may be something I'll have to check out. But yeah, when it comes to VMware vSphere, you just have to plan on having vCenter. I did talk to VMware's, he's in charge of the cloud infrastructure marketing, and I asked him, what about, is VMware ever going to have a free vCenter? Why don't you do that? And he said, stop looking at free stuff. VMware, I said, well, is VMware kind of like the Starbucks of virtualization? He said, yes, that's a good analogy. You're going to pay a little bit more, but you're going to get, better quality stuff. He said, if you want the Dunkin' Donuts or the free car dealer, coffee, then, there's these other hypervisors you can consider.
Right.
So that's VMware's approach. I guess we can take it or leave it, and we can vote with our, the hypervisor we select.
Right. Well, I know that Simon Crosby, the founder of ZenSource and former CTO of Citrix, uses a Drobo at his house for his own personal Citrix Zen server lab. So he and I have had some good chats over the years, and generally speaking, Citrix can be a great platform for folks to use. One of the comments here was, are the things we talked about applicable to Citrix? And I think overall, architecturally, there is applicability across the board. Certainly from a storage perspective, you probably see iSCSI more prolific in Hyper-V and Citrix environments than you would in VMware environments, only because most of the folks are looking for a lower cost solution that meets their specifications really well versus something that might be adapting an old enterprise architecture that they may have had before, which was higher cost. So you're going to get applicability there. And there's also a comment here from a migration perspective. People do P to V migrations and they repurpose their old hardware, probably as a backup server. Backup tends to always get the hand-me-downs. Do you see P to V as being something a lot of people do, or would they? What other ways do they move from physical to virtual versus a live migration? Do they do a backup and restore? Do they install a new application? Manually migrate the data? From your training courses, what different ways do you train folks on how to get from physical to virtual?
Yeah, I mean, I usually present P2V as just sort of a generic term of moving from any physical server to a virtual server, and then there's multiple ways to do it. You could use a tool, which is, I would recommend using a tool, but I think most people, that's how they convert, is some tool out there. Then there's, you could do a backup and a restore. That's certainly an option. You could start clean and then just migrate the data. And I guess that's, technically that's still a P2V. You move the application and data from a physical to a virtual. And then you could even use, other imaging type tools, like the old Norton Ghost. We used to do an image of, that host and restore that image into a virtual machine. So multiple ways to do it. I mean, VMware has VMware Converter, which is there's a free version of it. So, if you're using VMware, I think that's a great tool to use. I've used, for example, there's even B2B tools now. We saw in the survey that 57% of the people are already using, have
both
most of their servers virtualized.
Right.
So there's even B2B tools, that I've been testing, to move from, say, vSphere to Hyper-V or Hyper-V to vSphere.
Right. Well, speaking about Hyper-V, we have a question out here. They're a 100% virtualization shop. Naturally, you have a lot of great courses that you've developed around VMware vSphere, but do you have any opinions on some of the business things that might trigger someone to start evaluating Hyper-V, even if they're a 100% VMware shop? I think the biggest reason you mentioned was staying sharp on skills. It's never bad to become knowledgeable of that, and a lot of these other virtualization platforms like Citrix or Hyper-V would allow you to get them for free to evaluate them in your lab, not unlike doing a free version of VMware. Also, where do you normally see people picking up their second skill set around virtualization? And when is there a company trigger that would really prompt them to look into learning more about another virtualization platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different paths. The official company trigger might be when your VMware, license agreement is up for renewal, and you see the price tag associated with that, and as a company, you say, well, gee, maybe we could save money, looking at another hypervisor. But the personal trigger, which is most of the people I talk to, is one, they just want to learn more and benefit their career or get certifications, and then also I think I should point out that I think Microsoft's done a great job by including client Hyper-V in the new Windows 8. So if you haven't checked it out, that's an interesting solution because you have here a Type 1 hypervisor equivalent to Hyper-V, on a server running on your desktop, included for free in your desktop operating system. So you can use Type 1 Hyper-V or client Hyper-V in Windows 8 and move those virtual machines to a Windows 2012 Hyper-V server. It's completely compatible and it's free, unlike, say, paying for something like VMware Workstation. On the flip side, though, VMware Workstation and Fusion, they have a lot more features. If you're going to be continuously using, a virtualization solution on your desktop, snapshotting and all these, high-performance features are great. But, again, if you're interested in learning Hyper-V, I think client Hyper-V is a great way to start.
Hey, fantastic. I know that we have a comment here from Microsoft. You got to love a mature, competitive landscape in the sense that, this user is citing that Microsoft's providing additional discount on their other Microsoft licenses, like SQL, if they agree to use Hyper-V. So that's an opportunity to stimulate folks to getting a chance to go ahead and look at that. Certainly, that is something that can help. I think overall, they're like anything. There's probably brands that you prefer, brands that you may not consider that offer the same level of service. Certainly, with new Server 2012, there's a lot of new features associated with Hyper-V that are interesting. Do you have a couple top ones off the top of your head from what you've seen so far in terms of Server 2012 that make the Microsoft more interesting than it used to be?
I mean, obviously, it's a lot more scalable than in the past. You don't have many of those performance limitations that you had. And then, similar features, like live migration, shared nothing migration, replica, all those types of features are, I think, very compelling. Now, are they exactly the same as vCenter or in vSphere? No, they're not. They're not 100% identical. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but and that's why I encourage people to learn for yourself and try these things for yourself, because it's so hard to quantify, to have some checkbox, on a website where you do a product comparison and you say, does this one have vMotion? Yes. Does this one have live migration? Yes. But and from that, you might assume that they function exactly the same. That's not exactly true. So the more you can learn and do for yourself, the better. But yeah, lots of great features.
I totally agree. In fact, storage is one of those things that's hard to evaluate side by side as well, which is why Drobo offers live demos from technical experts. No sales guys involved. Drobo.com/live. There's several times a day where you can tune in and join as many as 24 folks also in there, learning a little bit more about how iSCSI storage works and how Drobo's technology works. So that's a live demo opportunity available to you at Drobo.com/live. Something I'd urge you to check out if you want to learn a little bit more about iSCSI storage if you aren't already familiar with how that works. One of the last questions. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Speaking of Drobo storage, before we run out of time, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned I do have a Drobo and an 800i, and I've been actually using it a lot with my Hyper-V, my Windows 2012 Hyper-V training course that I've been creating. And I've been amazed. And also recently I connected my Mac systems, my Mac desktop and laptop to it as well. And I've really been amazed at how easy it is, to provision new storage, how slick the interface looks, and what was the other thing I wanted to mention? The thin provisioning. I really like the thin provisioning. I mean, I've been actually struggling to figure out how to use, all the storage I have. And these servers, they think they have a ton of storage. And, the Drobo, I don't have to worry about LUNs. I don't have to worry about, RAID or, anything like that. So I just wanted to take a moment to make sure that I mentioned that I really have enjoyed, using your product. And having used, a lot of other SMB, type storage solutions in the past, it's really made things simple.
Well, I appreciate that, David. I am not just the Hair Club president. I am also a client as well. Myself, I have a Drobo at home. I agree. For me, the reasons why I love working here, and I worked for the biggest fiber channel company on the planet for almost a decade, and have gone from $100,000 systems to now systems that are $2,500. So the idea that you can make storage easy is something that we at Drobo really focus on. So we're happy to show you that in a live demo. And somebody listening to this live broadcast is going to win one of those exact systems that David just mentioned for their own home lab. Now, you could take it to work if you really wanted to, but we're hoping that you take it home and you build a virtualization lab out of it and get some training courses and get yourself trained up on all the latest and greatest stuff. Hey, the last question I want to ask you, David, has to do with what are the drawbacks of virtualization? Clearly, if you were to put people in a group setting, no one would talk bad about it because it's almost like you would be seen as kind of out of touch if you were to say bad things about virtualization. But it may not be for everybody. Are there some drawbacks or some places where you wouldn't use it? Because naturally, there needs to be balance in all things. I imagine that while it's good for a lot of things, maybe there's some things you may not recommend it for. What comes to mind?
I think in the past we used to have this list of applications that virtualization isn't good for. Particularly, it was always the tier one, the big applications, high performance applications, high I/O applications. But I think today that's not really the case anymore, and it's just one of those things where do a proof of concept and plan it right, and 99.9% of the time it works fine. We might get into more specific use cases where it isn't quite right when we start looking at VDI, virtual desktops,
right?
Running those in your cloud infrastructure. There might be some graphic applications that we've made a lot of advancements in that area, but might not always function as well as we'd hoped, or you've got a lot of mobile users, and all these things have to be taken into consideration. But in our back when I was consolidating servers with virtualization, it was always try it first, and if it doesn't work, then you can consider plan B. But the mantra was always virtualize first, and so I try to recommend that to people today because it was very successful for us.
Right. And I'd agree with you. One of the last questions we have is a Drobo question about is Drobo working to speed up some of the home-based appliances like the Drobo FS? It's the one that I have at home. For me, it works great with Macs. It works great with laptops. I got a dozen of them here around the house, and they all back up great. But for trickling in backups, streaming performance really isn't super necessary. From a business perspective, Drobo has our large B1200i that offers both SSDs and hard drives, so an automated tiering solution, giving you the equivalent of 3 boxes full of 15K SAS drives in one box with a mix of high-capacity hard drives and SSDs. So that cool auto-tiering technology applies there. Not yet available in our 8-bay system, but certainly stand by as we continue to develop in our software stack and make new software available in those platforms. On the professional side, David, I had a chance to shoot some videos with you over at VMworld. Thanks for posting those. That was awesome. We have new products on the professional side that are direct attach, great for Mac environments or workstation environments with PC where you need a lot of super high performance USB 3.0 and Thunderbolt technology for the connectivity with hard drives and SSDs, with a cool new feature of an mSATA SSD. I showed you that, David, when I was with you live. A teeny little card, no bigger. I mean, it's half the size of a business card, pops into the bottom and gives you automated tiering in your solution so you don't have to consume your front-facing drive slots and sacrifice capacity with smaller capacity SSDs. So that's a cool solution that Drobo has launched just recently. And on the file sharing side, you can imagine that Drobo's product line will continue to evolve in that area, and you can expect to see some cool developments from Drobo soon there, where a personal NAS could have both hard drives and SSDs coexisting to give you the best of both capacity and performance. And one last thing I want to mention from a Mac perspective, David, looks like you're a Mac user. Drobo iSCSI couldn't be easier because we build in the Atto iSCSI initiator into our Drobo dashboard software. So if you have no idea what iSCSI is, you might think it's a hygiene problem. After they take your training course, they know exactly what it is, David. But generally speaking, all you do put is a tick box next to the volume, and it mounts up and looks like a local drive. It is really simple, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at first, because I looked at using iSCSI before on a Mac with other solutions, and I had to buy an initiator, piece of software for the Mac, and I was like, I really don't want to spend $100 on a piece of software just to connect to my iSCSI array. So when I asked you about it, that was kind of the answer I was expecting, but I was amazed that you just install the Drobo dashboard and, say connect to the Mac, and it just worked. So yeah, that was a really cool feature that I was totally, unexpecting, not expecting. So
yeah,
cool stuff.
Yeah, it is cool. One last thing on the SSD, it looks like we have some questions. This will be the last question. Thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And David, thanks a lot for providing your expert commentary. Folks on the live chat here really enjoying that. The last question, though, from a high cost of SSDs. The perception is SSDs cost a lot of money. In fact, you haven't even had a chance to use an all SSD system, really play around with SSDs. So do you have an opinion just yet on how to justify those? Because just like getting authorization to go to a training class, you probably have to get authorization to buy some SSDs to put them into your lab. So any advice that you have around kind of some ways to structure your justification for bringing SSDs in? Is it a matter of measuring your IOs using your tools available in your hypervisor and then proving that you need more IOs? Or are there some other rules of thumb that you could apply to really justify looking at SSDs?
I think, what you mentioned there, that's one great way. If you can show you need more IO and you can get it in a, smaller package, and especially if it's, perhaps you've got an aging array or something you might be able to replace, you can probably replace some, refrigerator size, array with a something that looks like a desktop computer these days. But, I think that's one great way. Another way, if you can, I tend to use sometimes guerrilla purchasing. If you can sneak it in with, with a project, perhaps a new application or something like that, start off with a small, maybe SSD solution and move up. The auto tiering, I really like because it's this kind of hybrid solution. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Maybe you could, instead of buying an all SSD array, maybe you could buy a hybrid solution. Might be a good way to go.
Yeah, I think looking at anybody's data pyramid, David, the stuff that needs the highest IOs can sometimes be high capacity, but generally speaking, it's exchange logs and the hottest part of a database. And the bulk of what they have, archives sitting at rest, tier 2 and tier 3 applications, big things like media files, video. You shoot a ton of video and stuff, so I'm glad you're using that Drobo. You can use it to store all that stuff redundantly, not on single hard drives, so you don't lose any of that footage. But those sort of things, your marketing department, file and sharing, and tons of files out there, that's the type of stuff that may not be as IO intensive. So having a hybrid solution, especially if it does auto tiering, kind of like a Drobo, you can have it put the stuff that doesn't need to go fast where it's most cost effective on the 7,200 RPM hard drive, high capacity, 4 terabytes today, and going up from there very soon. And then the stuff that needs to go fast, you can have it on a small amount of SSD. To the extent that you can make it easy, it's even better, so you don't have to pick which ones are the ones that need to go fast, which ones are the ones that go slow. It's one of the reasons why Drobo does our live demos every day, as I mentioned before. Drobo.com/live. You can check out how not only an iSCSI SAN works with VMware, but also learn a little bit more about how auto tiering can help you out there. That brings us to a close, and I want to really appreciate everybody for participating in today's poll. Your call to action. Once I compile up the folks here and I share that list with David, we'll announce some winners on who our live winners are, but the winning will not be over at that point. If you do not win, and statistically all but one of you will not, you'll have a second chance to get in and get a Drobo B800i iSCSI SAN for your house by filling out a very short online survey. Pretty much the same stuff that you did here with a couple extra questions. It helps us to gather this information and understand how it works. And for your time, we really appreciate you and want to give you a chance to win. But I'm hoping that the reason you tuned in today was to get access to a guest expert here in the industry from TrainSignal. David, thanks a lot for joining us. Any last comments that you have on TrainSignal and some of the things that you can offer to folks that are out there looking to do virtualization?
I really appreciate you having me on today. It's been an honor. When it comes to training and learning about virtualization, I mean, right now I'm working on a Windows 2012 Hyper-V course due out later this year. From there, I'll be working on a vSphere 5.1 course. But we've got so many other training courses. vSphere. We've got VCAP training courses, advanced networking courses. VMware View, Site Recovery Manager. We've got a vCenter Operations Manager course on the way as well. So, lots of exciting things to come. Stay tuned. If there were questions about virtualization and training, that I didn't answer today, feel free to email me, david@trainsignal.com, and I'll do my best to help out.
Or go follow him. Yeah, no, hey, follow you on Twitter at David M. Davis. Follow at TrainSignal as well. Drobo's pretty easy. At Drobo if you want to follow us, tweeting up a storm. But we appreciate everybody going in there. And just from the live chat, David, tons of folks saying thank you for today's session. For those who missed it, or if you want to let your friend in on the good discussion, we'll be sending an email out to everybody who registered with a link to the replay. Feel free to forward that to all your friends. And if you got friends that want to get in on the winning, I know you probably want to increase your odds of winning your own Drobo. Forward it off to them so they too can participate in the live survey and get a chance to win. Cheers, everyone. Have a fantastic day, and we'll send out the link to the replay as well as an announcement of the winner very shortly.